then, pull up a chair, grab a pint, or a cup of tea if you're feeling proper, and let me tell you about a right old kerfuffle that nearly tore England apart. We're diving head first into something known as the Popish Plot. Now, if you're thinking, Popish? Sounds a bit Catholic, innit? You'd be spot on. And if you're thinking, plot? Sounds a bit nefarious. You'd be even more spot on. This wasn't some quiet little conspiracy. This was a full-blown national panic. A hysteria so wild it made people see Jesuits under their beds and Catholic assassins lurking in every shadow. Imagine, if you will, a grey, drizzly London in the late 1670s. King Charles II is on the throne, a man known more for his love of spaniels and mistresses than for his religious zeal. The country's still reeling from the Civil War, the execution of his dad, and the whole Cromwellian Commonwealth business. Everyone's a bit on edge, a bit jumpy, and in this fertile ground of paranoia, a seed of pure, unadulterated madness takes root. Our story, like all good tales, begins with a character who's either a genius manipulator or a complete and utter charlatan, or perhaps a bit of both, like a particularly shifty squirrel with an unusually long tail. His name, Titus Oates. Now Titus Oates. What a name, eh? Sounds like something out of a Dickens novel, doesn't it? And his personality certainly fit the bill. This wasn't your average bloke down the boozer. Oates was a disgraced Anglican clergyman, a man who'd been kicked out of pretty much every institution he'd ever joined. He'd bounced around, even converting to Catholicism for a bit, only to be tossed out of a Jesuit seminary for being, well, unreliable. If his life was a tapestry, it would be unravelling faster than a cheap sweater in a washing machine. But Oates, bless his conniving little heart, saw an opportunity in the deep-seated anti-Catholic sentiment that simmered beneath the surface of English society. You see, since the Reformation, Catholicism had been viewed with suspicion. Popes were seen as foreign potentates, and Catholics as potential traitors, ready to stab England in the back for the glory of Rome. It was a potent cocktail of fear and prejudice, just waiting for a spark. And Oates, that magnificent fabricator, was the spark. One day, in the autumn of 1678, Oates burst onto the scene with a story so outlandish, so utterly preposterous, it had to be true, right? He claimed he'd infiltrated a massive Jesuit conspiracy, a sprawling network of priests, nobles, and even the Queen herself, all plotting to assassinate King Charles II, put his Catholic brother James on the throne, and then, get this, massacre Protestants across England. He delivered this tale with such theatricality, such conviction, that people actually started to believe him. He had a carefully constructed narrative, complete with lists of names, alleged meetings, and details that, while completely fabricated, sounded just plausible enough to send shivers down the spines of an already paranoid public. He even claimed that the Pope had issued a bull, a papal decree, not a big angry cow, though the chaos that followed was certainly bovine in its intensity, authorizing Charles's assassination. Now you might be thinking, how on earth did anyone buy this guff? But remember the context: the Great Fire of London, the plague, the perceived weakness of the monarchy, and a deep ingrained fear of a Catholic takeover. People were primed for a good old-fashioned conspiracy. And Oates, for all his flaws, was a master storyteller. He knew how to tap into those anxieties, how to paint a vivid picture of impending doom. The initial investigation into Oates's claims was spearheaded by a magistrate named Sir Edmund Berry Godfrey. Now, Godfrey was a bit of a mixed bag. He was a Protestant, sure, but he also had a reputation for being fair-minded. He interviewed Oates, took down his incredibly long and detailed testimony, and probably thought, right, this is a bit much, but I suppose I have to look into it. And then, just as the story was starting to gain traction, something truly bizarre happened. Sir Edmund Berry Godfrey vanished. Poof. Gone. And a few days later, his body was found in a ditch on Primrose Hill, impaled with his own sword and showing signs of strangulation. Now this, my friends, was like throwing a gallon of petrol on a bonfire. The public reaction was immediate and explosive. "Aha!" cried the masses. "This is proof!" Godfrey was about to expose the plot, and those dastardly papists silenced him. It didn't matter that there were no real leads, no credible suspects. The narrative was set. Godfrey was a martyr, a victim of the Popish Plot. The government, under immense public pressure, had to act. They couldn't be seen to be ignoring such a grave threat. Charles II, ever the pragmatist, probably rolled his eyes so hard he nearly sprained them, but even he knew he couldn't ignore the howling mob. And so began a witch hunt, a reign of terror that lasted for 3 long, chaotic years. Parliament was in a frenzy. Whigs, who were generally more suspicious of royal power and more anti-Catholic, jumped on the Popish Plot like a starving dog on a dropped sausage. They saw it as an opportunity to push through legislation that would exclude James, the Duke of York, Charles's Catholic brother, from the succession. This was the famous Exclusion Crisis, and it nearly tipped England back into civil war. The fear wasn't just about religion, it was about power, about the very future of the monarchy. And by the way, get this, Oates didn't just target prominent Catholics. He also implicated several figures who were known to be politically opposed to him or simply inconvenient. His accusations weren't random, they were strategic, designed to remove his enemies and solidify his own precarious position as a saviour of England. He was a master of weaponizing fear for personal gain, a true proto-influencer of paranoia. The trials that followed were a mockery of justice. Accused Catholics, often prominent figures, found themselves facing Oates's theatrical accusations, backed up by other equally unreliable witnesses who suddenly appeared out of the woodwork, eager to jump on the bandwagon. People like William Staley, Edward Coleman, and many Jesuit priests were dragged before biased juries, often with little to no real evidence against them other than Oates's word. The atmosphere in the courtrooms was akin to a baying mob at a football match, eager for a conviction. Think about it. Purpose. For Oates, it was self-preservation and notoriety. For the Whigs, it was political power and keeping a Catholic off the throne. Integrity? Ha! That word wasn't even in the dictionary of the Popish Plot. It was a free-for-all of fear, ambition, and a shocking lack of critical thinking. The fear reached fever pitch. There were public fasts, anti-Catholic parades, and bonfires burning effigies of the Pope. People genuinely believed they were on the brink of a bloody Catholic invasion. Rumours flew faster than a runaway stagecoach. Irish armies landing, French fleets on the horizon, secret Jesuit tunnels under London. The entire country was gripped by mass hysteria, proving just how fragile public opinion can be when fear takes hold. Imagine a dimly lit London tavern, smoke curling around the rafters. A nervous merchant whispers to his friend, "Did you hear? They say the Jesuits have a secret arsenal hidden under St. Paul's, ready to arm 100,000 papists." Cut to a courtroom, Oates, resplendent in a ridiculously large wig, pointing an accusatory finger at a trembling old Catholic noblewoman. "This woman," he thunders, spittle flying, "she harboured Jesuit assassins in her very drawing room. I saw them with my own 2 eyes, plotting the king's demise over a cup of tea and a biscuit." The crowd roars. The judge, looking utterly exhausted, bangs his gavel. "Silence! Order in the court!" There is no order, only the relentless march of paranoia. What if Sir Edmund Berry Godfrey hadn't been murdered? What if he'd simply dismissed Oates's claims as pure fantasy? Would the plot have fizzled out, a mere footnote in history? Perhaps. Or would another spark have ignited the anti-Catholic tinderbox? The fear was so deep-seated it's hard to say. The absence of Godfrey's murder might have denied Oates his immediate credibility, but the underlying anxieties would still have been there, waiting for another charlatan to exploit them. It highlights how sometimes one seemingly random event can completely alter the trajectory of history, especially when a population is primed for manipulation. When we look at the Popish Plot, It's a masterclass in how easily individuals and nations can lose their way when purpose and integrity are abandoned. What was the purpose of these accusations? To protect the king? No, not really. To consolidate political power, yes. To prey on public fear, absolutely. There was no moral clarity, only opportunism. Oates's actions lacked any shred of integrity. He was a pure con artist. The government, in its rush to appease the masses, abandoned its duty to justice. It was a time when the mob dictated policy, and rational thought went out the window faster than a condemned man from a scaffold. The executions piled up. Around 35 innocent people were sent to their deaths, mostly on the flimsy testimony of Oates and his growing band of imitators. Priests, nobles, ordinary citizens, all victims of a manufactured panic. It was a stark reminder of how dangerous it is when fear overrides reason, and how easily a charismatic liar can lead a nation astray. As the years dragged on, however, cracks began to appear in Oates's increasingly elaborate fabrications. His stories became more and more outrageous, contradictory, and frankly, ridiculous. People started to question him. The frenzy began to die down, like a fire running out of fuel. The Exclusion Crisis fizzled out as Charles II, ever the political survivor, managed to dissolve Parliament and call new elections, effectively stemming the tide of anti-Catholic legislation. When Charles II died in 1685 and his Catholic brother James did take the throne, briefly, as it turned out, before the Glorious Revolution, Oates's star well and truly fell. James II, understandably not a fan of the man who tried to exclude him and sent so many Catholics to their deaths, had Oates arrested. He was tried for perjury, found guilty, fined, whipped mercilessly, and put in the pillory. He was essentially publicly humiliated, stripped of his notoriety, and reduced to the very thing he was: a disgraced liar. So what can we learn from this grand old mess of the Popish Plot? Well, a few things, I reckon. Firstly, it's a bloody stark reminder of the power of fear and misinformation. In an age before instant news and fact-checking, a cunning storyteller like Titus Oates could spin a tale so compelling it brought a nation to its knees. It shows us how easily we can be manipulated when our anxieties are stoked, when we're told there's a secret enemy lurking in the shadows. Secondly, it's a lesson in leadership. Charles II, for all his flaws, ultimately managed to navigate the storm, though not without sacrificing some innocent lives in the process. But the political class, particularly the Whigs, showed how easily ambition can override principles, how a perceived threat can be weaponized for political gain. They weren't acting with moral clarity. They were acting with calculated self-interest, riding the wave of public hysteria. And finally, it's a testament to human gullibility and the cyclical nature of panic. We see echoes of the Popish Plot in various forms throughout history, right up to the present day. Whenever a society is under stress, whenever there's an other to blame, a charismatic figure can emerge to sow seeds of distrust and suspicion. The core identity of a nation can be corrupted when it loses its sense of purpose and integrity, when it allows fear to become its guiding principle. So next time you hear a wild rumour or see a conspiracy theory doing the rounds, just remember Titus Oates and the Popish Plot. Ask yourself, who benefits from this fear? What's the agenda? Is there any actual integrity behind the claims? Because history, my friends, has a nasty habit of repeating itself, especially when we forget its most chaotic lessons. Stay curious, stay sharp, and stay just sober enough to remember it all. This was just a swig of history, and if it wasn't in your textbook, it bloody well should have been. And before you go, do a brother favour and like, share, and subscribe.